Let's talk about one of the most stubborn myths in popular science, a myth that Hollywood absolutely loves and, believe it or not, has even snuck its way into our classrooms. Yep, we're talking about that old idea that we only use 10% of our brains.
You know, you can just feel the frustration in this comment from a neuroscience fan. It's exactly what experts feel when they see movies like Lucy or Limitless treating the 10% myth like it's a fact. It's a fantastic idea for a movie, for sure, but as we're about to see, it's just terrible science.
And this thing is incredibly widespread. We're not talking about some fringe belief here. A recent survey found that a whopping 59% of teachers around the world actually think this myth is true. And that's a really big deal, because what we believe about our brains has a huge impact on how we think about learning itself.
Okay, so let's get into it. Here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to look at where the myth came from, then we'll tear it down with some hard science. After that, we'll get into the much more exciting reality of our brain's true potential, and we'll wrap up with a handy guide for how to tackle this neuromyth in the classroom.
So where in the world did this idea of a huge, dormant part of our brain even come from? Well, it wasn't one single source, but more like a misconception that just sort of simmered and grew over the last century.
The origins are a little fuzzy, to be honest. It seems to go back to some misreadings of early animal studies, plus some theories about human potential. The psychologist William James talked about us only using a tiny fraction of our potential. And then somehow that got twisted and solidified into this very specific, very catchy, but totally wrong 10% number, probably thanks to the marketing genius behind Dale Carnegie.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today and see how modern science just completely refutes this old myth. There are really 3 killer pieces of evidence that just leave no room for doubt.
First up, let's just follow the energy. I want you to think of your brain as the most demanding, high-maintenance piece of equipment you own.
It's actually pretty tiny when you think about it. Your brain only makes up about 2% of your body's total weight. It's a really compact, efficient little machine.
But, and this is a huge but, it is an absolute energy glutton. Even though it's small, it burns through a fifth of all the calories you consume every single day. And for a baby, that number can jump to an incredible 60%.
Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, that just makes zero sense. Why would nature pour so many precious resources into an organ that was supposedly 90% offline? It would be a colossal, ridiculous waste of energy.
And that brings us right to our second piece of evidence, the brain's fundamental operating principle: use it or lose it. Your brain is constantly fine-tuning itself for efficiency.
I mean, think about it. If the myth were true, evolution would have favored smaller, more efficient brains ages ago. Any brain cells or connections that weren't getting used would just wither away and disappear. We actually see this principle in action all the time. Even tiny bits of brain damage can have huge noticeable effects.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. What about all those colorful brain scans I see? You know, the fMRI images where only little spots are lit up. It's a really common point of confusion.
This right here clears it all up. Here's a better way to think about those scans. Imagine your brain is a city at night. The whole city has its lights on. It's always active. Those bright, colorful hotspots you see on a scan, that's just showing which neighborhoods are using more electricity at that moment for a specific task. It never, ever means the rest of the city has gone dark.
So the myth is officially 100% busted. We use all of our brain. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the real story of our brain's potential, which is, frankly, so much more amazing.
See, the true power of our brain isn't some huge, locked-away percentage. It's this dynamic, lifelong ability called neuroplasticity. This, right here, is our actual superpower.
And this isn't just a cool concept, it's physically real. Every time we learn a new skill, our brains literally change. Studies have shown that learning to juggle can actually increase the volume of gray matter in your brain. Becoming a pro at typing measurably rewires its structure. These are real, tangible, biological changes happening inside your head.
So, as cognitive neuroscientist Dr. Julie Frantoni points out, we need to completely reframe the question. It's not about how much of our brain we use. The real question is, how can we use our entire brain to better reach our potential?
Okay, now for the most critical part. As educators, how do we take this scientific truth and use it to truly empower our students and change how they think about learning?
This is the core shift we need to make in the classroom. We have to replace the old myth of a fixed, untapped resource with the reality of a dynamic, adaptable brain. Potential isn't some vault you need a key for. It's a garden you have to tend and grow.
And this scientific fact that the brain can change is the very foundation of that powerful educational idea called a growth mindset. Some call it malleable intelligence. It's simply the belief that our abilities aren't carved in stone. They can be developed through dedication and hard work.
And this works. It's not just a nice theory. A groundbreaking study found that when teenagers were taught that their intelligence is malleable, that they can literally grow their brains, they did significantly better than the students who were taught it's a fixed trait, especially in tough subjects like math.
So why does all this matter so much? Because the scientific reality of a plastic, ever-changing brain is just infinitely more empowering than any Hollywood fantasy. It tells our students that their effort, their strategies, and their practice are physically building a better, stronger, smarter brain.
And we'll leave you with this final thought. Knowing that our brains are constantly being shaped by what we do, well, that gives us and our students the ultimate power to decide what that shape is going to be. The potential isn't untapped, it's truly unlimited.